I was telling people that last week I attended the African American Black Cohort, and it was very interesting to listen to the things that they were talking about and where they were going. And they were, of course, interested in what we were doing. And so I'm so glad that Brother Ron has joined us today so that we can share with him as well. So I'm going to issue him sort of a communal welcome.
Well, thanks again. Of course, we didn't know Saturday was going to happen when we were meeting on Thursday. So this becomes an even heavier lift for our community and all the communities that are allied with this kind of ridiculous hate crime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it just really underscores how important our work is going forward, and how we must do all we can to reduce this incidence of crime against communities.
You know, Ron, when you bring that up, I've been thinking a lot about that for the last 3 days. I just returned from Texas, from Dallas, and a lot of interesting conversations about the role of government, the role of different civic leaders, and especially in the wake of the revelations and the questions about the intersection of so many different um, authority figures. And
Yes.
you know, it's I heard and had several conversations with teachers who were at this event that I was at, and it was a really thought-provoking and difficult series of difficult conversations. And so I'm eager to hear how the cohort is thinking about that work. I know that the National Hate Crimes Commission, Hate Crimes Coalition, that has lots of national groups on it, was also convening today to talk about how the work of the United We Stand initiatives that are coordinated, or at least were galvanized by the Biden administration, all the way from Wisconsin through, across the country, all these different initiatives and groups that are partaking, thinking and really wrestling with this question of role and responsibility. It's what's going through my mind, and as I think about the work that we have together, the different roles and responsibilities of entities and organizations, and then this bigger question of, which seems like deceptively simple, how do we confront hate that is not necessarily evident or visible?
Yeah.
The stories are starting to unfold, and today,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate, Ilhan, you attending that cohort meeting. I think it's really important for us to also model the listening to other groups, because the intersectionality of these challenges is very real.
Absolutely.
The other thing is that I sent a message to our group, Brother Ron, saying that over 40% of American Muslims are either African American or of African descent. And that does not count the Indian subcontinent population, which can also vary in degrees of shades of color, right? So
Absolutely.
just the African portion of the American Muslim population is 40% or more. So there is this,
Absolutely.
intersection. I'm going to give the floor back to Adela, but I don't know if you have an agenda, Adela, but there's two things I wanted to add to that agenda. One, I did do some work I sent you guys on microaggressions. I don't know if you're able to look at that. And the other thing that I was going to look at, which is really bothering me more and more, is this separation of hate crimes versus incident and what hate biases or whatever. I was looking at the letter from the Attorney General in one of Washington, in one of the reports that was included in the email that was sent to us. And it said, in recognition of the need for more action to confront hate crimes and bias incidents. So, when we deal with hate crimes, and when police only worry about hate crimes and the rest of us have to keep records on hate crimes, that doesn't cover the full spectrum of hate, basically, against others. And I'm having trouble grappling with, that sort of big nebulous thing that we're not getting a grip on, at least I'm not. So if we could put that somewhere on the agenda, I'd appreciate it, Adelit. So I'm gonna over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Bertha. Actually, Bertha did put an agenda together. It is on the website. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. And yes, I totally agree with that. And we'll just add Ilhan's points to the agenda as well. Couple of things, bringing Ambreen up to speed as well, and Imam Faisal, because you can attend last time. We did confirm the time for our listening session for September 11th. I am sorry I got your link, Bertha, but I just was having some bit.ly issues. So I created a bit.ly link today. I'll send out the flyer to all of you today, tonight, with the registration link, and the time is 8 to 9:30 on September 11th. We stick to that date. Time is confirmed, registration link is there, and I'll send out the flyer. I did create what is it? The QR code as well. So the QR code will be there if you want to share it as a picture, because then you can't click on the link. So people don't have to type the whole thing. So I'll send that out tonight. That was my action. One of the things that I guess we had talked about last week was doing a questionnaire. Ilhan, did you have any chance to play with that? You were going to create a questionnaire, Google form?
Not really, no. I didn't get a chance, to be very honest. I was at a retreat for the last 4 days at the Turkish Center. So I was in house for the last 4 days. So I didn't get a chance to really look into my schedule.
But you can be the, so you're going to take a look at it?
Yeah,
Ilhan, you're on mute.
No, I can hear you.
Okay.
No, I'm on
Ilhan
mute.
is
Okay.
talking.
Adelit, I totally missed that. I can't even find it in my notes. What was I supposed to do?
Remember we had talked about creating a Google form. You were going to look into creating that. You had gotten some questions as well that we had discussed in terms of if people are not able to attend, or they anonymously want to give us some feedback, this is a way for them to do that.
I can do that. I'm going to
okay.
put that in my notes right now. So I'm so sorry about that.
No
Yeah.
problem. So yeah, so one of the reasons for that was in case people cannot attend because they have other commitments, but they still want to give feedback, this was a way for them to kind of give their feedback. If they choose to give us their name, great. If they just want to give us suggestions, that's fine as well. So that was one thing.
I'll do that after the meeting tonight, inshallah.
Okay. And then in terms of the flyer, so Bertha, I'll send that out to you, and then I can send it to Kate Chance as well, and we can kind of blast it across WhatsApp groups and get it out there.
We'll do a press release as well and include the flyer and post it on our social media channels too.
Okay.
And send it out to our list. Yeah.
And then going to the listening session, I think we needed, Bertha, did you get an answer on if we create a Google Doc and talk in the Google Doc? Is it?
I did, and unfortunately it does violate Open Meetings Act.
It does? Okay.
Yeah, it does. So what as you know from Tuesday's meeting with the Jewish cohort, what they're doing, it's pretty much opening a Word doc where they just pretty much take notes of the different decision points in the meetings, and as they were already discussing policy recommendations, they were including those on that document, which they pull again. They've only met twice, and both times that's how they've been keeping a record of it. Okay. But again, with a shared Google Doc, it's according to our attorney, even if
we share the link publicly, it's still not okay. Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that's covered. So we won't go there. In terms of, let me go back to the listening session. Ambreen, how do you feel? We kind of nominated you last week, even though you were not here. How do you feel about moderating the session?
Oh, I'm happy to. It's thank you for volunteering me. No, I'm more than happy to. I've actually moderated quite a few listening sessions, so it's something I'm pretty comfortable doing.
Okay, so in terms of an agenda, are we giving some prompts to the people? How do we want to do this for the listening session?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be online.
Yes.
So I think a question that I have for Bertha, when we did our first meeting, we have had support from you all in terms of moderating the chat and then question and answers and creating groups. And so I think that, I can work on creating 2 scenarios based on the number of people. Because if we have a lot of people who participate, my experience in terms of facilitating is that we want to create a mechanism for people to be able to talk and hear from each other. And if we treat it like a traditional platform, that could lead to people being not able to share. So why don't I put together, since I'm learning this now, let me think a little bit about what the mechanisms would be with somewhere between 15 to 20 people. I mean, I'm just going to make an assumption. Let's say that there are 15 to 20 people who join us. I think that I had put together earlier a series of questions that I think are still relevant, that would be helpful in opening up a space to listen to how members of the community think about the access of questions around reporting, the access of questions around the role of policy leaders in creating a climate that challenges or actively condemns anti-Muslim sentiment, and that fosters or facilitates a culture in the county and among civic leaders around embracing the plurality and diversity of the community. And so I can think about some prompting questions between now and, let's say, Thursday, and put that together and share it with our group in an email if that works for everybody, mindful of some of the challenges with a Google Doc. Just hearing, I wasn't able to follow why that exactly violates the public meeting notice, but I respect the opinion of council. How does that sound to the group?
I'm fine with that.
Sounds
There were 2 things that I wanted to kind of mention. Ilhan, I do see your hand. Give me 1 second. One thing was that Bertha was very helpful in terms of offering to help if we need to do breakout rooms or stuff like that, to kind of be the background, throw people,
Right.
move people to different rooms and stuff like that, right? So the technical aspects of it. So Ilhan is your backup. In terms of if we have too many people, we can go to different rooms, and then the third person is me. So depending on how many people we have, how big we want the group to be, we can do that. One of the caveats is I am traveling at that point. I am out of the country. I will be on the Zoom session unless I have technical difficulties. So
Okay.
if I'm traveling, then it kind of makes things tricky. That's why I want to be the third backup, not the first or second one.
Sure.
But I will be there. Ilhan, you have your hand.
Yeah, so just real quickly, while you're doing this, I can also be your chat monitor, Ambreen, because sometimes it's hard
Fabulous.
to monitor, and so I could be the chat monitor.
Okay, great.
The other thing that I wanted to ask is some of the issues. I don't know how you're going to get to it, but I'd really like to know if people feel, so what's the point? I think there might be there might be 2 issues coming up, and that might be, I wouldn't even know where to begin, how to complain. And that we have a habit in our community of always complaining to the wrong people or making points to the wrong people. And the second thing is, a lot of people in our community say, what's the point? And so how do, in the listening session, I know that we listen to that. I wonder if we'll be prepared to give a response to that too.
Well, I want to pick up on that. My initial kind of reaction or thought to that latter point is that probative with questions to better understand, but not to try to answer.
Yes, we're just listening at that point. One of the things we had discussed last time was some of the suggestions that we have, our shared Google Doc that we had started putting together with list of items that we think we can use those as conversation points, or we can share those in terms of these are some of the suggestions and what else do you have? But I think it's more of a trying to get more from the community as opposed to solving everything. We're not
Right.
solving.
I also, and Ilhan and Adia and Ron, also welcome you and Imam Faisal to give thoughts on this. But one of the things that I'm very mindful of is those of us who are involved in at a level of like community leadership engagement in our different circles. One of the things that I'm mindful of is the amount of time and some of the background knowledge that we all have. Like
Yes.
Ilhan, what you just said is so reflective of someone who has background knowledge and expertise in working through systems of government. Who do you talk to? Who do you complain to? And I wonder how, I hope that we get a lot of folks to participate. And I think that the conversation and the listening, kind of the grist of what we want to hear is going to be in part informed by the number of folks who participate. But as we're listening, I would love to hear from you all as we're thinking about recommendations, how some of the, what are the most critical questions or assumptions that you want to have answered that you're not sure about, or that you feel we need to engage as we're making our recommendations to our fellow cohort groups in preparation for our meeting. Because I see this meeting, the listening session, as twofold. It's a stakeholder opportunity for us to listen and to empower and to model to folks in our community that there is a mechanism for bringing issues and for raising issues. And then you'll hear those issues lifted up. This is all transparent. The second is that I think it is a learning opportunity, and I am incredibly mindful of how diverse American Muslims in Montgomery County are, and the critical need for us to recognize our own, I'll speak for myself, my own limitations of who I'm hearing from and what I'm hearing. And so making sure that the stakeholder meeting is also an opportunity to really, as much as we can, again, dependent on who shows, listen to the nuances of how this conversation around policy leaders in a municipality working to confront a rise in hate sentiments that manifest as violence and bias. That's I'm saying it very specifically because I don't want to create the perception at all that this is somehow a mechanism for solving, to your point, the problem of hate. This is a very specific objective. What are the things that we think policy leaders in our secular society and civic leaders can do to lift up and proactively engage based on the lessons that we have in our own collective history? So that's the frame that I'm kind of coming into this as I just hear and think about it with you all. But I would like to hear if there are other things that you see also as equally, or if not, also vital to what we get out in terms of a goal.
Well, it's a good opportunity for us to listen to all the voices across the table. But at the same time, we should ask for specific examples of hate crimes in their own society, so we can document this as a teaching method for us also, and see how best we can be able to approach it from that perspective. After gaining insight from what they're saying, from their perspective, we have, as a Muslim point of view, we have a different perspective of how we look at hate crimes from across the table. So it's good to have this open session with them. I highly recommend something like this.
So on top of what he's saying, I think as people share hate crimes that they might have experienced, it would be very nice to know if they reported those to anybody, right? Whether it was school or whether it was outside, even if it was in the workplace, did they feel comfortable enough to report it to anybody?
Yeah.
Knowing who to report to comes second, but did they even try?
And, and again, we're back to hate crimes versus incidences of bias. I mean, they could be suffering a great deal and we're still talking about hate crimes. I mean, hate crimes are very, very small number of, potential incidences that could happen. I find this very confusing. I mean, it makes me uncomfortable, to tell you the truth.
Ilhan, I completely appreciate that. This is the scope of this, the scope of trying to think about the recommendations, the mandate around hate crimes and dealing with the environment that we find ourselves in the county. I think that based on everything we know about how hate itself manifests, from ideation, cultural, cultural insensitivities, normalization of marginalized portrayals of people in media. They're right. Like, who are the experts that we hear? Who are the voices that are there? All these various lessons that we have. We're not operating on a blank slate. We know you've shared great research. There's a lot of great research out there. To that point, to your point, is there a question, that an open-ended question that you feel like would be important to lift up in this session so people can hear, and also have that as an entry point, understanding that for many people, they may not have experienced a hate crime,
Right.
but they have experienced bias, racism, prejudice, and it may be intersectional. It may be microaggressions in the workplace or in the school environment or in their civic community spaces. So can you think of a framing, or maybe that's an assignment for me to think about a good question?
No, you can actually ask. I didn't mean to cut you off, Sabrina.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you can actually ask, have there been situations in your, lifetime where you felt that what was happening to you was a result of prejudice, was due to prejudice on behalf of the other person?
Mhm.
There's a lot of people that say, no, this happened to me because that person is prejudiced against me.
Right.
And just see how many, and what were those incidences? And some of them maybe your own sensitivities, and it maybe wasn't an issue of prejudice, and which I think is more rare than other. But I mean, when a black man goes into a store and everybody tenses up, that is a reality. That's somebody's lived reality. When black boys have to be told that, look, when you're walking down the street, make sure that you have a smile on your face, make sure you don't look at all threatening, make sure your body posture is a particular way. I mean, that's a reality that people have to live. And and the fact that so many of my neighbors, because this affects me, because half my neighbors have to live like this.
Yes.
This affects me because the life that half of my neighbors live is not as free as the life that I live, or is not as secure as the life I live, and it makes me incredibly mad. So excuse me for that. A lot of people say, well, you're white, this doesn't really impact you. It does impact me. I don't want to live in a society like that. I don't want to live in that kind of society. And of course it impacts me. So yeah, but I think that moving away from quote unquote hate crimes and going into incidences of prejudice, or incidences of aggression, or incidences of bias. Can you list some of those if you feel happened to you because you were identified as a Muslim?
Incidents of vandalism, I would consider that as part of your comment.
But that's a crime. That's actually a crime.
Destruction of property. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will.
So-
I hear you, Ilhan, and I will work on a series of questions. I think I'll prepare for this the way I do prepare for typical sessions that I'm moderating for the public. I'll put together a framework and then have a draft, and then we'll circulate that to you all, so you have an opportunity to give some feedback to it. Adila, I will be mindful of your travel schedule so that you can have an opportunity to give input as well if there are things that you think. If I'm mindful of your travel schedule, I'll try to get that to you early.
No, that's fine. I'm going visiting my parents, so that's all I'm doing. It's
Okay.
not a vacation thing. I'm just gonna be with there taking care of them. So whenever they go to sleep, then I have my laptop and I will pay attention. So
You are a good daughter.
That's what about so I tried to put something in the chat in this meeting and I couldn't, and I'm wondering about the listening session. is the chat gonna be open? Is there gonna be, is it gonna be set up so there's gonna be a chat area?
Yeah,
or-
so Bertha's able to open it. Last time she opened it for us as well.
Yeah,
so-
but I think she has to make us owners or something, but I'm just wondering for the listeners.
No, she had to make us owners when we want to share our screen. So
Oh.
if Ambreen has some slides that she's sharing in terms of questions so that people have a question to look at,
Uh-huh.
then she can make Ambreen the owner or whatever
Because
that
sometimes in other sessions, there's been a separate
co-host, sorry.
link. No, there's been actually a link that people could go to have a chat dialogue going. And I'm wondering if we want to do something like that so people can have an on the side dialogue that would also be made public.
Yeah, and I can ask my colleague Equin, who's the one helping us set up all the Zooms and knows, you know, the different settings to have for the full task force meetings. We typically do not allow people to have the option to chat just because we want to monitor closely what gets posted. So instead there's a Q&A option instead of just having, you know, like an open chat. So
Can I understand, can you help me understand that, Bertha, for the purpose of a listening session, just given that we're not able to gather in person? Why is that? What do you mean? Help me understand the rationale behind that.
No. This does not apply to your listening session. That's just what we've been doing for the full task force meeting. So if you've noticed that, it's because, as Ilhan mentioned, we do like a separate Q&A section for people to be able to type their questions as opposed to having an open chat. But that's
Got
just
it. Oh,
force meetings. Just, you know, we wanted to make sure we can monitor that more closely. That does not apply to any of the listening sessions going forward.
understood. I actually like I've done with a lot of press conferences that I attend. They have that similar that are on Zoom. They have that similar feature. Chat is not enabled, but Q&A is open and enabled, which then allows in the background for the moderator for somebody to assist the moderator in flagging, okay, we're now going to take this question. So
Yes.
that while one person is talking and listening to a question and answer, and maybe somebody has an idea and they're populating it, it allows for, especially in a screen environment, in a virtual environment, for attention to both those things at the same time. I like that, but I don't want to say that we need. I like that, and I appreciate the rationale for it now. I'm okay with that because I think it does facilitate an ability, Ilhan, especially if you're assisting and moderating, for you to be able to see it. And it's I'd like to have, you know, it be as little confusion as possible, you know, in facility, because a lot of people have not. My experience has been a lot of folks don't actually ask questions in Zoom environments. They go in to listen. They don't turn on their video. They don't turn on their audio. So really making sure that Q&A or that chat feature, whichever we choose, but I think we do need to just choose one.
I guess we'll see it we have our task force meeting. We can look at the Q&A tomorrow. We'll get a feel for it and see whether that's what we want to use for our session as well.
Yeah, Bertha, is there a limit on Q&A? Like, is there a limit in the text, in the space that you have to post a question?
I'm not sure about that, but I can certainly find out.
Okay. And Ron, I'd love to hear from any of your cohort meetings, if you all have had any discussion about listening sessions and kind of any strategies or successes you've had in engaging folks to participate, especially in addressing the nuances that Ilhan has raised.
Yeah, well, you know, you guys are a little ways ahead of us, so we're still working through some questions, and you know, what in my mind, I think we certainly need to deal with, you know, what if anything the stakeholders have been doing. So, you know, we're trying to prioritize the agencies. You know, of course, you kind of expect that they want us to use the information already provided from MCPS, from MCPD, and some of the other stuff that they've provided in terms of reports from other jurisdictions.
Sure.
also the other questions from MCPS. So, our whole idea is the first phase is to develop some questions from this body of information that we have, and so as to guide our approach to it, and keeping in mind that fact-finding mission would have to include the stakeholders, the victims, and maybe even the perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal is really, in addition to that, is to get behind what the motivation is and the reason for the hate. It's a little different for our community, I would opine, because of the longstanding history
Mm-hmm.
of these assaults against our community. So, we're weighted down from, the vagaries of enslavement and
Mm-hmm.
99 years of Jim Crow, and all the intervening terrorism from Red Summer and beyond. So, your point earlier that a lot of groups are underreporting, and even in your community. Well, part of that reason why our community probably does not report a lot is because we've just become numb to it, because
Mm-hmm.
the incidents are innumerable, and the most would say that they also go unpunished. So we expect also that it won't be a one size fits all report when we get done with this, because it's just not possible to survey and investigate every hate crime, every group that has suffered the same. But we expect to have some report that would also be collaborative, and then educational. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually sitting in because, admittedly, I've not spent time with my Muslim brothers and sisters. I have a classmate from high schoom I talk to, very infrequently, but he's a Muslim, and I think he moved out of town as well. But I also have a former law clerk who worked with me in a community organization called Concerned Black Men, where we
Mm-hmm.
were working to reduce,
Violence.
self-inflicted crime due to the drug scourge in the District of Columbia. He is also a lawyer, and he also serves as the president of the Charles County Commission.
Mm.
And so I have on my plate to call Reuben Collins, who is the president there, and get his idea about it, because he is still a practicing Muslim and would have something to say about how it impacts his community down there, and may also foreshadow our work here. And the same with other groups that we plan to sit in, because at the end of the day, at least for me, none of us, no group, should stand for hate violence against any other group.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. I want to be able to protect your child, your brother, your sister, your mother, whenever I see that. And I don't want to be, buoyed by some misinformation or stereotype or,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things that cause us to not unify around some basic things that communities, particularly diverse ones, should be about. And then it's the educational piece. A lot of us just don't know, what practicing Muslims believe in, what the policies are, and whether or not we're doing anything to infringe or insult or what have you. But even if it's not a hate crime, if it's bias, if it's an incident, the bias and incidents also are gateways to crimes.
Yeah.
So it starts somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and then getting at the root of it is certainly necessary in the entire process, so that we can deal with what we are tasked with doing. A task force is an emergency type function. Okay, we're here because this is emergency,
Mm-hmm.
and we must treat it as the same. So
Yeah.
that's where we are, and we hope we can continue to collaborate. All you guys are welcome, and we're also going to plan outside of this some kind of community event where we can all get together and break bread.
Mhm. I love that, and I appreciate you sharing it. And I'm a big fan of Concerned Black Men. I used to be involved with an adjacent organization in Georgia uh, earlier. So, Ron, I want to pick up on there's something you said that I want to just lift up that has also happened, and I apologize if this came up in your meeting last week. I don't believe it did, but I could be wrong. In the intervening days since our task force has been convened and gathered through this emergency processes, I think you aptly describe it. There have been allegations that have come to light about mechanisms within MCPS in dealing with environments that fit not just the issues related to microaggressions and harassment, but the impunity in which teachers and administrators have been able to operate that violate the core values of the mission of the MCPS, and it
Right.
relates specifically to gender. Without diving into the allegations and the call for an outside investigation and questions about the various breakdowns within oversight in Montgomery County Public Schools, my question is this. I read those stories. I've been following it. I'm following what the council members are doing and how they are positioning themselves vis-a-vis the school board and the decisions that the school system is making. We live in a community in which trust is low. So many of the issues that have been lifted up in our conversations as a coalition, large and in our cohort meetings, have centered on the role that public schools play in facilitating or ignoring issues that relate to these questions of how groups relate to each other, and specifically when incidences that for this cohort would constitute Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bias, whether it's
Yes.
coming from the school administrator, staff member, lunchroom, leadership, witnessing but not engaging. I've heard many stories now in the last few weeks from parents that I've been engaging with and encouraging to attend the listening session of the things that they're concerned about. And something that keeps coming back is, well, if the teachers see what's happening or they hear it, but there isn't a culture of stepping in and doing something. And I wonder how the recent controversy, to the larger point of that question in people's minds, what impact will this have if the system itself is not truly committed to effectuating change? Did you all discuss the impact of the MCPS investigation on the way the community may view our efforts and our desire to get their input to be able to get some answers and make some suggestions to that larger point? I think, Ilhan, that you raised at the outset, like, what will it do?
No, we have not, but as a result of this question, I'm certainly the one to put that on the table. It cannot be ignored. Our school system has some real challenges right now, and but I will say this. It's a shame that we somehow or another become so tribal that we don't understand that the impact this is having on our children and how they are growing and into an acclimation of kind of fear and hate. So notwithstanding that comment, when we look at the MCPS system and the adjacent office of the superintendent and the authority, asserted over it through the indirectly through the council and through the county executive, but primarily from the state, then, you know, you're challenged with how do you really impact the process? One of the ways is that, you know, any group should consider is being at the table. You know, we have a saying, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And so, you know, Muslim brothers and sisters need to start preparing to run for the school board
Mhm.
and position themselves into other policy, you know, jobs or perches where they have direct impact on the process. You know, in our community, we are somewhat divided. And if you're talking about the gender and the opt-out issues, you know, some would support the latest Court of Appeals decisions.
Mhm.
But my survey is that quite a few more would not. And so, you know, I think at the end of the day, also both would support your constitutional right and your need to for due process to you know challenge those
Yeah.
decisions.
I wasn't speaking to the opt-out issue. I was speaking to
Um,
I was speaking to the principal that has been accused of is it now in the superintendent's office, who's former principal.
oh,
That
that one.
yeah, I was speaking to that. I'm not speaking to the opt-out. I think that there's
Uh,
actually I see that that is an issue that I think is far more I think it's adjacent. I don't think it's necessarily central to the conversation of what we're talking about here, because there are a lot of intersectional issues in play, and I think that there are also a lot of political issues in play.
oh, no
Um,
question, the
yeah,
latter.
my
Yeah.
and my question about the recent controversy, to be clear, is not about the facts of the incident or the contested nature of the allegations, but rather if the trust in the school system is going to be a factor that we need to consider as we're engaging the community, because so
Yeah.
many of the issues that were raised in the documentation that we were presented with come from the school system, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
leadership, the resources of this county. The way I was watching our I think it was 2 or 3 meetings ago when we had the presentation. No, it was in July, I believe, when we had the presentation from, I think it was Dame, and forgive me because it's late and my memory is not is I don't have my notes in front of me, but it was the where the
Damon,
hell thank you. I was gonna say Damon, and I was his name last name was escaping me. I went through that presentation again, and I was thinking about how there are a lot of resources that are involved in actually actualizing and implementing that. And the
Uh-huh.
question that went through my mind in the last 2 weeks is the school system itself positioned as a trustworthy agent of change in the community to kind of effectuate the kind of change it's seeking to do that's laid out in that document. And
Right.
I'm not saying that trainings are not a good idea or that there shouldn't be a discussion of microaggressions and implicit bias and facilitating. But when I was going through, there
Yeah.
were a lot of steps and there are a lot of resources that's going to require from the school system. And the question I have is, as I was thinking about it in the context of policy recommendations and money, is the school system the appropriate vehicle for doing the kind of anti-hate training and facilitating the diversity, equity, inclusion, training resources, and all of those implementation pieces that were in that proposal? It was the question that went through, at least for me, in light of what's coming to light.
Yeah, I would agree, but I would also say, what else did we have? Um, this is, you know, it's kind of like you're so far down the track with a lot of these things, and there are a lot of other, you know, if you will, burdens placed on the system. And you know, I talk to teachers every once in a while, and you know, a lot of my friends are administrators as well, and they would, you know, equally say that their roles have morphed into much more than they expected that they would take
Mhm.
as teachers. And one of the things that's pretty telling, when we had our meeting with MCPS, I think I put in the chat about what the expectation is from the MCPS, from the task force, and they said they would want us to partner with them, but also to in a way deal with all the challenges that they're dealing with, presented by students, kind of beyond their scope of work. I mean, you got 160,000 students,
Mhm.
you got thousands of teachers and administrators. So you have the perfect storm in some situations where people absolutely have to act with a high degree of objectivity. And it's subject to check. So you have your checks and balances, certainly within the system, but still it's only as good as parental engagement. We raise our kids partly through MCPS. Ended up all of them going to private school because we too had challenges of navigating our son through the system as well. Of course, he was labeled as too aggressive, as so that kind of thing. But I think it's still central to what we're trying to fix. And I just live with, there's no panacea to any of it. And your job as a parent, as a community leader, doesn't stop with just your children. It continues with every other child that's coming through your community.
Mhm.
You have to be vigilant about, pressing the system. And, this challenge here, yeah, you scratch your head. How did he get through? What's going on inside that would culture? And I heard at a cookout the other day that one of the things that was going on is that they knew who he was and how he acted, and a lot of people either enabled or just ignored it. And there you go.
Yeah.
If you don't stop it at the root, at the beginning, then some people think, hey, that's who I am, and you accepted me, and that's what you're going to get.
I don't want to dive into that, but I think that what it is telling as it relates to the work that we're doing is that incident has to do with also intersectional identities, right? There's
Oh, sure.
intersectional identities in play. And I think it relates to, some of the larger questions that we're wrestling with about accountability, impunity, and creating a culture of accepting the diversity of the community affirmatively.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. But it's again, even with this our work, will not end at sunset. Um, I think leadership is important.
Mhm.
I would not move to indict the superintendent or the school board leadership as at this point. I would wait to see what the independent report um, turns up, and or I believe the state inspector
Mhm.
general is going to wade into the situation. But yeah, I mean, there is certainly chock full of the intersectionalities
Mhm.
and issues. And if that also is a concern causes a concern about accountability, transparency, trust,
Mhm.
then we have to formulate a policy to address it. The audit that they did specifically for hate crimes, bias, and incidents, and the recommendations, I think have yet to be employed.
Yeah.
So that's another phase that we're waiting to see when they implement it, and when they, hopefully it'll be very soon, will we have some real experience, anecdotal or otherwise, to begin to fashion policies and solution-oriented recommendations. So, but whatever we can do, I mean, because I think, of course, because we do straddle both sides, certainly inherent in our work, it would be that we cover those issues as you see them as well. And, I would even say we need to share reports. I think the report tomorrow the final report from the Jewish cohort is going to, certainly inform us about some of the things we may need to do in our own investigation and report development. So, but I'm here, whatever you think we should join on, because we have a vested interest in a good school system that celebrates in a real way diversity and inclusion.
I think we have about 5 minutes more for wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So 2 things that I wanted to kind of catch up on was our next meeting. So next week is Labor Day weekend. I hope somebody can join for the run. We do have the 5K happening. I actually sent that out to the entire task force, and I had a couple of people respond back. Actually, one person responded back. Their synagogue already is part of it, so they'll be there. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And Imam Faisal and Iswa will be there as well. So that should be a cool event.
Unfortunately, I won't be here next Monday night. I'm going to Easter Convention.
Oh, nice.
Weekend in Chicago. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of our next meeting, tomorrow is the full task force meeting. And our listening session is on the 11th. Do we want to meet before the listening session?
Well, we're going to be in communication via email with each other in preparing for that. And so from my vantage point, I think that if we have, perhaps we can, if we feel like we need to resolve something, just Bertha, so clarification, we should not get on the phone with each other to like discuss things without doing it through a public mechanism, is my understanding from the training. So, Adia, I think my suggestion would be that if we feel quickly like we need to talk, that we can't do it by email, then let's enlist Bertha to assist us in organizing a meeting.
Okay. So for right now, we don't have something for at that point. Our next meeting is on the 11th, and our presentation is on the 19th. So we don't have to decide that right now. But we had put together some points in our last 2 meetings. We need to clean that up. We need to kind of come up with more points after listening to tomorrow's session as well. Will give us some ideas. Listening session will give us some ideas. So probably after the listening session and before the 19th, 18th might be too late, but we need to kind of figure out some time. So
yeah, between the 11th and the 19th, we should meet to plan our strategy.
Ilhan, you were going to say something?
Sorry. Yes. So I don't know. Remember that lovely email that was sent out to us with all of those links. I looked at those links, and these are reports that were done by other hate task forces, and very similar to what we're doing. So I don't want to be plagiaristic, but I also don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's people that have been doing this for a long time. So I think we should definitely take a look at those. Some of them work. Yeah, some of them are effective for us. Some of them give us ideas that we didn't even think about. And again, if you guys could think about this whole idea of, I'm still uncomfortable with hate crime versus hate incidences. And I'm confused about our task force. Are we only talking, it's an anti-hate task force, right? It's not
it's not an anti-hate crime task force. It's an anti-hate task force, which is why I feel like you have lifted up, Ilhan, the microaggression kind of what I call like the pre-crime conditions
Mhm.
that facilitate or create an environment in which the rise of incidents can take place and happen without happen with impunity, without
Right,
consequence.
right,
And so I feel like our mandate does include being able to address that. That way I read it. I
right,
feel like that first meeting, what we learned was the documentation efforts and resources of our county are focused on the criminal, using the criminal code that has been provided as the legal framework. I feel like that is within our purview to make a recommendation about addressing in a more fulsome way
right,
the issues that you're lifting up
right.
that relate to education, that relate to addressing and identifying the kind of microaggressions that you have talked about. So I just wanted to put that out there and say that I feel like I have clarity about that we do get to
Right.
address that.
So you're right, and that's where my confusion came from, is in that first meeting, there was a lot of talk about hate crimes. And in one of the recommendations that of these reports that I was reading is, have a place in the county where people could call and just report incidences of hate. The other thing is, if you noticed, from 2016 onwards, we become a very nasty country. And, a lot of, even in school board meetings, even in Montgomery County,
Oh yeah.
there have been statements, within 2 years of, parents at PTA meetings saying things against immigrants, saying things against, well, he's not as smart, and we don't know, we don't know why we have to allow these not so smart people, and then, racial overtones, which would never have been tolerated before 2016. And I feel like it's the group waiting at the red light. Nobody, unless one person starts crossing the street, against that red light, then do not walk sign, nobody does it. But as soon as one person does it, everybody else goes across. So I totally agree with you that when we make the environment such that we tolerate the smaller incidences of hate and bias, then we create an environment that allows for more and more of that to grow.
Mhm.
So I think somewhere I think we ought to capture that.
Okay.
That there should be something done to be able to
And
stop
and
that.
I'll make sure I have a question for the listening session that gets to that. I'll tee it up and then create a space for people to reflect on that point. I'll work on that as
Okay.
one of my action items for our listening session. I also have some recommendations from some other work that's been done in different parts of the country that actually are not as diverse as Montgomery County, but have worked to cultivate environments that try to shift the norms back, or shift the norms rather forward, to being more inclusive and informed about how those types of interactions that happen in public and quasi-public spaces, in our civic spaces, contribute to the overall climate of our community.
There's one other thing, and I know we're running out of time there, or have run out of time. There's one other thing I wanted to mention. I think it was either at our meeting or at the other cohorts meeting that I attended, where they were talking about Take Our Streets Back, Safety Ignite, or something like that, these events that the county is having, to have more evening time events. Well, those events end at 7:30 or something, and that's not a nighttime event. That's for young kids, for young teenagers, let's say anywhere between the ages of 16 and 22 or something like that. We literally have no place for young people to go, especially young men. We don't have any place for them to go. And so in Silver Spring, where I live, we have the store owners have relationships with the police where they don't allow loitering. Well, what does that mean? They're not allowed to be in the streets. If you're a young man, you can't be in the streets because you're too near McDonald's, or you're too near this place or that place. And I consider that prejudicial, because that is specifically aimed against people of color. They do not have a problem with white people walking around downtown Silver Spring. So that I consider that a racist policy that targets people of color, specifically Black people.
Mm.
And
Thank you for
the reason I know that is because there's a lot of African youth, Muslim African youth, who are also part of that big cohort, and get into trouble in Silver Spring because of that reason.
Yeah. I will think about kind of the framing of examples that might be helpful for getting creating an opportunity for folks to talk about the policies or practices that they think either foster or make confronting this even more challenging.
Ilhan, if you get a chance, if you know some of those kids, it would be nice if they could join the listening session.
Yeah, one of them is in prison, unfortunately. Yeah, you know, a Muslim boy. Parents from Mauritania, lovely family. And he just got caught up. He's nowhere to go in the middle of the, I mean, middle of the night is 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which is not middle of the night for 16, 17-year-olds. And, you know, I know a number of people like that because I don't know, Breen, if you can formulate something like, do you think that there are places for our kids to go that are safe at nighttime? You know, I mean, I was in Turkey just a couple of weeks ago. Nighttime is when everybody was up.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you been
Yeah,
to Italy? Spain, people don't even go out till 11 o'clock at night.
It's an interesting point you raise in Montgomery County, and it's intersectional, and then it relates to identities, perceptions of foreign and otherness in public spaces. I know that I have a 17-year-old Ilhan, and I'm acutely aware of hearing about the experiences that he has when he is with his predominantly white friends versus his predominantly people of color friends, how he is perceived, how he is approached, the experiences that he has shared with me numerous instances of what it's like depending on who he is with. And so I've actually, Adila, I've been really reaching out to quite a few young people, inviting them to attend and hoping they will, because I do think they hold a lot of insights. And I think there is a rawness right now in our country. And I feel like part of our mission and our obligation is to create a pathway for people who feel disempowered and don't feel like they're being heard to be listened to. And I really do want us to kind of get as many folks there. So I'm looking forward to getting the flyer with the bit.ly, and I will send it. And my understanding, just quick clarification, Bertha, in order to participate in the listening session, you must register. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you have to give your full first name, last name?
You don't have to. We can change
Okay.
the settings.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just mindful of like people like it's the climate we're in. Creating the lowest barrier for someone to participate without having concern.
So
Well,
Amber, the only thing they need is first name, last name, and an email, right? So that they get the link.
Okay.
If they create a new Gmail account, nobody's
Yeah.
going to go verify whether it's an
Yeah, yeah.
or not.
I want to make sure I can say confidently, like, what do you need to be able to do this? Like, it's a low barrier to entry is the point, other than you have to have internet connection.
Yeah, we're just trying to make sure that we have an idea of how many people are attending.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
And Tisha, Breen, you well know this, that, you know, the Muslim youth were surveilled from 2014 to 2016. So, you know, there's a lot of issues with.
And there's suspicion. That's the
right?
point.
Absolutely.
Ilhan, you are speaking exactly to the question that I am kind of getting to, which is there is a question about trusting where, you know, if I participate in something, what are the unintended consequences? You know, because this is facilitated and we have a history, to Ron's point, when you have a history experiencing surveillance and you are seen as a suspect, there is less trust and confidence. So that's why I'm asking the question, because it's to that point I want to address it. So thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I must leave in a few moments. Sorry about that.
Yes, we're done.
Can I just remind Ilhan, I mean, we spoke about the state attorney general's meeting coming up next, I believe it's Wednesday, the 6th, I believe. Their first commission meeting on hate response and prevention. And I don't think it's a Zoom. I think it's in person, and you have to register for it by Thursday. So I just thought it might be important that we all kind of coordinate what the state is also considering. You know, they
Share that. I don't think I've seen that.
Roberta, can you get us a link to that for us to register?
Yeah, if you go, Bertha, to the and I don't have the link right here, but I can send it out later. But it's on the Attorney General's website. So if you just Google State Attorney General,
I
it should
think
come
Bertha,
up.
you need to send that out to all the task force people, not just us. It would be nice. Or Ron, you could do that.
Yeah,
Um,
I could do that. Yeah, I could forward it to Bertha if she can't find it, and you can send it out to everyone. But I just think we don't want to again not be all inclusive about this, even though it's going to extend beyond our sunset. I see other groups being formed, but we should know what the state data is and what they plan to do to address these issues as well.
I'm gonna-
I just found it. I can send you the
Mhm.
link right now.
Can
And
I-
it's right there.
Can I make a suggestion though? Can I invite us to think about something? A lot of these commissions that are set up, I mean, I was looking at the House bill that created the commission that creates the mandate. Come to your point, Ilhan, of like, why are we coming together? I definitely want to pay attention to that, but I also want to get as creative as we can in thinking about what are the things. There's so many things that we have seen happen and not happen. And as we think about the recommendations and we listen to the community, I'm really eager to get creative and really challenge the leadership of our community to do things that are opportunities to step forward. I keep saying step forward because I think we're in a really unique time. You talk about 2016, we are in the midst of another presidential election, and the violence that erupted over the weekend. Today, there was another active shooter, event at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. There is a lot of violence, and there is a lot of, I think, concern about extrajudicial political violence that is being directed at minorities or those who are perceived as being quote unquote foreign or other. And I want to use our limited time to think about the community that we know. Here in Montgomery County, we have a leadership. I really am excited about thinking about suggestions and thinking as creatively as possible about ways that our various cohorts can work together to try something different, to step forward and try something different, because I believe we are entering another phase in which those pressure points that are causing and leading to the eruption of violence that is reminding us of breakdowns that exist in our society. I think our leadership has an opportunity to lead, and it takes courage, and we don't have a guarantee if it's going to work or not work, but there are a lot of great folks that we all know doing work and listening to our community. I really do believe that we can come up with a robust set of recommendations by the 19th. And I am excited about tomorrow and hearing what our friends in the Jewish cohort are going to be recommending.
Absolutely.
okay. We are good to go now.
I couldn't post it because I couldn't put anything into
No,
the
Bertha
chat.
shared it.
Oh, okay, great.
I
Thank you.
put it there, and we'll definitely be sharing it with everyone else as well.
Great.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Night, everybody.
All
Good
right.
night.
Brother
Thank
Ron.
you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.